So short agenda. I will give you some small introduction to widgets, then what is the widget provider, how it works, then how we can composing the widget UI using the Glance, how to manage the state of the widget, how to trigger the updates, change the state outside of the widget class, so make the updates not from the widget itself but somewhere else. Initial configuration, so configuration activity when you place the widget on the home screen, and then up launch from the widget, why we still need XML, and my thoughts and conclusion on that. So, short introduction to the widgets. How many of you are using widgets every day? Like, do you have widgets on your screen? This like, okay, a little bit more than half. So Google is saying that 84% of Android users have at least one widget on the screen. Another fact is that widget is pretty old. It was introduced with API 1, and Google was imagining it like little applications that are living in the home screen. So this is something that is, in my opinion, very important for the widget, that this is not fully functional app. This is just some sort of the application, just a sneak of it, and we should use it and keep it simple. Widgets are using remote views, which is the simple system view type that we can use to display things on the home screen. And now we have Jetpack Glance that is a wrapper around this, and I will be talk about this later. So what Glance is doing and why I think we need that. Because Glance essentially is the wrapper around remote views in XMLs that we are using for the widget. So it's not entirely changing the way how we display the widgets, it's just how we are coding the widgets. So in Glance library, you have this Glance app widget, and we have the Glance widget provider. And then we are using Compose runtime to actually produce our remote views and XMLs. Glance is currently in alpha version 5, and it was introduced in December 21. So there is not a lot of updates and still in alpha. I talked with the Googler why we are not in beta yet, because I do not see any issues from my perspective, but they do not want to make any changes when they will hit beta, and there are some things that they might change now. That's why it's still alpha. So if you would like to use it, you need to add the dependency for Glance, and then also enable the Compose, and using the Kotlin compiler, the Compose compiler, because we are using the Compose compiler to go through from Glance to those remote views. So what is the widget providers that we are using in classic widgets? It's essentially a broadcast receiver with those two functions to override. One is on receive, where every event from the that is connected to the widget are coming. And then we have this on update, that on the update events are coming, and we can update the widget UI. Now with Glance, we have just one field to override, which is Glance widget, Glance app widget, sorry. And this is something that I called for this example weather widget. For the purpose of this talk, I prepared this small widget that is just showing you some weather info, like temperature, city name, and wind. So you have the data class that represents the state. We have the weather item and loading true, false if it's loading or not. So the loading state. And we have this weather item with address, latitude, and longitude that I will use to know which widget I have currently on the screen. I will share more about that later. And temperature and wind speed. So to start with the Glance app widget, we need to create the class and extend the Glance app widget that have only one function to override, which is composable function content. So every update that will come to our widget are going through this content. We can add our state to the constructor, and every time we need a widget, we could call this constructor. but I will tell about that later. So in the content, we are calling just blocks, UI blocks from the compose that I hope you know. And here there are few things that differ from compose, of course. And we have the background that is like image provider, and I have here the drawable. It's very simple drawable with just white background and some rounded corners. And then we are calling on it app widget background. We need to call this on at least one element in the widget, because this is our root of the widget, and without that, the widget will not be displayed. So this is essential. That's why I'm putting that in the box that is my root component of the UI. We could, oh, I now highlighted that. That's great. We could use corner radius instead of putting the drawable with rounded corners, but surprise, it's from minimum APN 31. So right now it's unusable, but maybe it will be usable in 10 years or something. So I will not go along the way with all the things that looks like compose, because this is just a simple view. So we have just the column, row, spacer, some image text, and things like that to create that. But what is very important here is that we are using totally different imports than those from compose. And why I mention that is because when you have the glance dependency and your compose dependency in one module, you might use by accident those dependencies in your activity, for example. And you know what will happen? Android Studio will show you nothing. And what happens if you run your app? It will crash. And the same with widget. So in the widget, you could use composable text, and you can just run the app, but then the widget will never appear because it will crash internally. So here is the list of the glance components and glance modifier. As you can see, there are all like basic, essential things of composable. And I will just go through really quickly how to make this one row, and I will show you one thing that is a little bit different than the compose. So first thing that you can notice is that we are not using modifier, we are using a glance modifier. Maybe that will be something that will Google update, and then in the future we'll have glance column and glance text. That would be very nice, but for now we have glance modifier. And then we have some spacer with glance modifier, and here we have this function on the glance modifier called default weight, and that gives us weight with one floating number that we would use in the compose, so it will take the whole available space. Then we have the text with some style, weight, text align, and all of those, surprisingly, are from compose libraries, not glance libraries. So they are mixing both, and you need to be careful with that. And at the end, we have this image with icon for refresh. So whenever we will click, we'll refresh the widget, but I will show you how to do it later on. So now the state management. That is the big topic with Glance, and they made a really good work on that. So the Glance is introducing this class called Glance State Definition, and by default, it uses preferences from data store library. And there is also the Glance ID that is internal data class that have the app widget ID inside. And this app widget ID is the ID of the widget that you are placing on the screen. If you are working with the widget, you know that every time you place a widget on the screen, the Android system is giving you the new ID. And it's quite hard to manage those IDs, because whenever you are restarting your phone or you are placing new widget or removing the widget, the ID changes. And now Glance is changing that because you do not need to worry about that anymore. Because this Glance ID is staying with your widget whenever you're restarting the phone or giving new ID, new widget on your screen. And the glance state definition is connected with this glance ID. So whenever you would like to fetch the state from your preferences for this exact widget, the only thing you need is glance ID. So they are creating preferences for each widget that you have on the screen. And those preferences is those simple one from data store. You're just creating the key value pairs like this. I'm using here the latitude and longitude as my unique keys to know which widget I have right now on the screen. And just to make my life simpler, I made this widget state helper class that is saving the whole state or saving location or is checking is this preferences stored, so I know that this widget is displayed on the screen because preferences have those info. That means they are living on the screen. And also set loading that I will update when we will be updating the state. So now when we have that, we no longer need to put the state in the constructor. We can call the widget state from the content of the composable function. And what is the current state? The current state retrieves the current customizable store for view-specific state data as defined glance state definition in the Surface implementation. Yeah, but essentially, is that what I said previously? So glance ID is the only thing you need. And since we are using this content, the glance ID is something that we have in the composable local ID. So it's used this composition locals to have your glance ID whenever you are calling content. That's why you can call only the current state and you have those preferences state already with your state of the widget. So now how we can trigger the widget update. There are two functions to trigger the update. One is using the content, the glance ID, and preferences. So this one is used to update the preferences itself. It's not updating the view, it's just updating the preferences. And the second one is trigger the composition, and it's also suspend function update that is using context and glance ID. So this one will just call your content composable function. So you need those two, to make it work. So where should we make the computation for the widgets? When I gave previously this talk at the beginning of this year, there was no any recommendation from Google. But now they are recommending Work Manager, and I'm 100% support that. I think this is the best way to do it. There are some people that may argue maybe the widget receiver, but the widget receiver is essentially what we have right now. So the widget provider is the broadcast receiver, and we shouldn't use the broadcast receiver to update things that may collapse, they may failure. We shouldn't make things that are too long to process. It's very risky. And you might think also about the service, but service is always connected to something like activity, and that also is not safe. So Work Manager is the best that we can do right now on Android. So in this Work Manager, we can do some network calls. We can update our local database, so update also our widget state. We can make some simple computation, and then we are just sending that to the widget or the view, because widget is exactly that, is the view. So we shouldn't do anything there, just displaying the state and then perform some actions from the user, nothing more than that. So how to trigger this update? I showed you before this refresh icon with the clickable modifier, and here we have this action run callback, which is a function from Glance library, and you can specify a class of this action that will be run when user clicks. This is something that underneath has the intent, but this is like new way of doing that. And here we have a widget refresh action that is extending action callback with this one function to override. And it has already what we need, which is context and glance ID. So this is essential to make the update for our widget. So what I'm doing here, I'm calling my preferences from the get app widget state with context and glance ID. Then from my helper, I'm taking the location, so I will have my latitude and longitude to make the API call. And then I'm starting my worker only one time, so this will be single one-time worker. So it's a weather widget worker. I'm building it with this latitude and longitude so I can make the API call. And then I'm just calling enqueue one time to make the refresh. So how we can change this state from the worker class? We do not have the glance ID there, so how to do that? So in order to make this update, we need those two functions. So I combine them into one because whenever I'm changing the preferences of the widget, I also want to recompose my widget. So I combine that to one, so I'm calling only one function each time I want to make an update to the widget. And here we have our worker. So I have here repository, I have the context, and I have the worker parameters, which are essentially my latitude and longitude. So in do work, I'm taking the location, which I'm just retrieving from those parameters, and then I'm starting to check if I have the access to glance ID. And there is this class called Glance App Widget Manager that takes context. And this manager is holding all the app widget IDs, so those glance IDs that you have on the screen. But we are interested only in those that are from my widget, which is weather widget. But I could have more than one weather widget on the screen. So this is a list. And what I'm doing here, I'm checking if this latitude and longitude that I have in the worker is also something that I have already on the screen, and then I'm retrieving the glance ID from it. So when I have this glance ID, I will follow, but if I do not have, so my widget is no longer on the screen, I'm just returning failure. So when I have this glance ID, I'm updating the loading state of the widget, and then I'm following along. So I'm calling the repository, get data. When I have the data, I'm updating the widget with the item, with my state. I'm saving the new state to the preferences. And if I cannot get this, I'm returning the retry. So my worker will do the work again. To check if now I can get the data from the API. So now initial configuration. So whenever we are putting the widget on the screen, there is an activity that starts, and this one is super simple. I have just list of few cities that have the latitude and longitude, so I can make the call to the API, and I'm updating the state, showing you the temperature and the wind. So I have here this super simple data class that just displays the name of the city and its latitude and longitude. And then when user click on it, I again need to know what glance ID I will refer to. This one will be a little bit simpler because the Glance App Widget Manager have all those glance IDs that I want from the weather widget, but I'm calling here last. I'm calling here last because whenever you are placing the widget on the home screen, the configuration activity already creates the glance ID. And it's putting it on the top of the list. So this is just the last ID. And it's always like that. So I'm just calling last, And then I'm using the update app widget state. I'm updating state. I'm using my helper to save location because I do not have any more data here right now. Then I'm saving the address as well. I'm updating the widget so the recomposition happen. And then I'm starting my weather worker again, but this time I will do the periodic work. I will show you. And then I'm just finishing the activity. So how to enqueue this widget update to work periodically? I'm using periodic worker here. So I want to have the network constraint to be connected because I'm doing the API call, so I need to be connected to the internet. And then I'm starting my request, which is periodic work request. I'm using this weather widget worker and putting there 15 minutes. This is the minimum that you can put for the worker. Then I'm setting my backoff criteria, so whenever it will fail, it will try to do it again, but it will not call every few seconds. It will exponentially extend those time between calls. I'm putting my data for latitude and longitude so I can make this network connection, and then I'm setting my constraints so the network is connected. Then I'm putting the unique tag with the latitude and longitude, which is my unique keys for this widget. And I'm calling the get instance, and I'm enqueuing the unique periodic work with this unique tag, and I'm putting the work policy to keep. So whenever I will have the situation that another call will start, but the one didn't finish yet, the new one will be just cancel. So the old one need to finish to make a place for a new one. So one of the last topic is open from the widget. We want our widget to be the gateway to the application. So we want to open it. In this case, I'm just displaying name of the city and latitude and longitude just to show you that it works in those two widgets are different things and they are opening different data from the app. And you have here the clickable actions that are available right now in Glance. Is action start activity, action run callback that I used before. There is the action start service and action start broadcast receiver. Obviously, I'm using the action start activity here because this is what we want. So in the root of our widget, I'm calling the clickable modifier, and on click, I'm starting the activity. I'm putting some parameters like name, latitude, and longitude to display the info. So why we still need XML to make widgets? So we still have manifest, and we need to register the provider, the receiver of the widget. Here it is. So we have the weather widget provider, and this is the classic provider that we are using since API 1, and we still need that, and it's in XML. I don't know if they plan to make any update to that, but right now it is like it is. We have the configuration here. We have the initial layout that we need to set. So initial layout needs to be XML. And in my case, it's very simple layout, just showing the progress bar, because I will anyway just call my worker to make a proper update, so I'm just displaying the loading. And we also need XML for drawables, because right now the Glance is not supporting material icons. So we need the XML for that as well. So final thoughts and conclusion about the Glance. So in my opinion, we really needed that. It's like from API 1, it was dead. So that's perfect that someone started to build things. It follows composable syntax, so it is quite easy those days to pick up. It supports Android 12 features like those rounded corners and the configuration and then the edit of the widget, so it supports all of this. It is still Alpha 5. So I hope it will be stable next year or something, but it's still Alpha 5. And there are some examples and recommendations from Google, but there's no like clear guidance yet. There was a talk on DroidCon London from Marcel, who is the DevRel in Google that is working with Jetpack Glance. but it's a talk. It's not yet like documentation and guidelines. You know what I mean. But at the end, I wanted to show you one thing, because in the previous company I work, I made this air pollution widget in Glance because we had a lot of problems with classic widgets, like really a lot. Everything was bad. And since I introduced the Glance, we do not have any issues at all. Everything works perfectly. So I'm not saying like alpha is production ready or something, but I'm using that on production since February this year. And there was no issue whatsoever. So in my opinion, Glance is ready, but there might be some changes in the API. That's probably why there's alpha. And this is probably ready because underneath it's still remote views. So it's just a wrapper. That concludes my talk. This is the QR code to the GitHub repo that you can see this sample app that I built for this talk. So it's everything is there with the work manager and state management and this simple widget with the temperature and cities. So you can go there and use it. You just need to provide the key for Open Weather API, but it's simple to get. So you will manage. Thanks.